Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video. We're having a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days. For today's second video, that will take us to around the 27th of January. So we're heading towards the end of the month now with the week to 10 day time frame. And we'll be able to extend out beyond that with the extended GFS and ECM ensembles running to around a couple of weeks. Have a look at CFS V2 for February at the end of the video. January Friday has been released earlier on today, so that's the month ahead look ahead, taking us through the second half of January and into the first couple of weeks of February. Looks like there'll be quite a bit of high pressure around in the next 4 weeks, so we may be turning the corner now on this very, very wet spell that we've been enjoying or enduring, depending on your point of view, since around the second half or the middle part of September. Actually, it was a very wet autumn, and it's gone on into the first half of winter as well. We could be turning the corner on that and going into a rather drier phase. But have a look at January Friday and see what's going on there. I'm going to start off with the centering temperature again, because once more we have popped back up to that number 7.5. So this is the CT at Hadley, part of the UK Met Office, January 2020, CT 7.5, that is provisional. To the 16th of January, so to yesterday. That's nearly 4 degrees above average, 3.9 degrees above average. That's an all-important number because 7.5 is the number that is the warmest January on record. So if we was to stay at that level, if there was to be no deviation through to the end of the month, if it was to stay at 7.5, then we would equal the all-time warmest January on record. And if we go to this page, this central temperature page at Gaz Weather is showing every month CT back to 1659. The oldest and most consistent temperature record anywhere in the world, albeit the further back you go, of course, the more unreliable it gets. So when you get back into the 1700s and 1600s, it's only a broad idea of what the temperature was like in those months. It's very unreliable at that part. But anyway, we go down through the centuries and the decades, and we come to the year of 1916. There it is, that number for January 1916 at 7.5. That is the mildest January on record. The warmest January on record is 1916. That goes back to 1659, and it hasn't been beaten, that January temperature record of 1916. So if we was to stay there at 7.5, we would equal the mildest January on record. The thing is, we're not going to stay there. We're going to see that dropping over the next few days as we're in for some pretty cold nights, especially where this is, through the heart of England. We are going to see some pretty cold nights coming up, temperatures going sub-zero from tonight really through the weekend and into the early part of next week, and that will take at least a degree off that by the middle of next week, probably a little bit more than that. So if we come down to the current year, of course, so we haven't actually got 2020 in yet, but we have got 2019 just there. So we can see that, excuse me, we can see that November 2019 came in with a CT at 6.2. And December 2019 came in with a CT at 5.8. So it depends how far this temperature is going to fall in the second half of the month for January 2020. It could be that this January, I think it's relatively likely actually that this January will be milder than December. So that's quite unusual. Typically, January would be a colder month than December. I think there is a reasonable chance we will come in with this January CT above 5.8. So a milder January than the December before it. It's not totally impossible that this January could come out milder than November as well. November was only at 6.2, so it was a relatively cool November. That's going to be harder to achieve because I think the CT is likely to come in actually somewhere in the low 6s for this January at the moment. Will be determined, I think, by the last week of the month, but it's not totally impossible that January 2020 could be milder than both the November before it and the December before it as well. That would be quite unusual. That doesn't happen very often, that you get January milder than November. If it did happen, it would typically be associated with a very cold and unusually cold November and December combination. And we didn't really have a particularly cold November-December combination last year. It's just indicative of how extremely mild this January has been. Actually, if we go back up to 1916, which is the mildest January on record, that month did in fact come out. There it is, just there, 1916. That January 7.5 did in fact come out above both the November and December before it. So December 1915 had a CT of 5.3, and then November 1915 was actually exceptionally cold with a CT of 2.8. I think that's the coldest November ever recorded in 1915. Very strange winter, really. Coldest November on record, relatively mild December, exceptionally record-breakingly mild January, and then it got colder again in February and March, with 2 cold months in February and March of 1916. So it's a very odd winter. But that January did in fact come out milder than both November and December before it. But there aren't all that many examples, I don't think, where this has happened. Another one would be 1921, where January had a CT of 7.3. That's the second mildest January on record. So that must have been quite odd to have the mildest January on record in 1916 and then to have the second mildest January on record just 5 years later in 1921. And that January also was milder than the November and December before it. So November 1920 had a CT of 6.8. December 1920 had a CT of 4.2. So it's quite unusual to get January milder than November and December before it. We may do that this time. I think there's a better chance that this January will come out milder than December. Remember, December 2019 had a CT of 5.8. I think there's a decent chance we'll be above that for this January. We could be somewhere very close to that sort of low 6.2 that it had in November of 2019. So whether we come out milder than both November and December remains to be seen. But certainly this is going to be a milder than average January, and quite significantly so. The last time we had an exceptionally mild January we had a pair of them actually in 2008 and then 2007. January 2007 had CT of 7.0, so that is one of the mildest Januaries on record. Not quite as mild in 2008 at 6.6. So I imagine this January will probably be the mildest January since 2008. I think it's unlikely it will be the mildest January since 2007, because I think we'll finish up under 7 degrees probably. So I think probably the mildest January since 2008. So that's going to be, 12 years, the mildest January for 12 years, looking quite likely. But of course, we'll be keeping an eye on the CT to see what happens there. It may come down more than we're anticipating. If we do start to tumble into the thighs with this January, then we're looking at years like 2014, which had a January CT of 5.7. That's like the mildest January between this year and 2008. So that would only make it if we come in around 5.7, that would make it the mildest January for 6 years. Not all that impressive. So it remains to be seen where we come in with this January. Obviously, it's going to be milder than average, but we don't yet know how mild it will be. We'll be keeping a close eye on that over the next few days, and of course the next week to 10 days. Right, so these are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. We're looking at rugby today. The red line is the 30-year upper air temperature average for rugby. We're starting off colder than average, so it is going cold, and that's how our frosty nights are going to be achieved initially, from quite a cold air mass. and also combined with high pressure to have clear skies, light winds, that's going to cause frost to occur. Early next week, the upper air temperatures lift up, but on the surface, it's going to take a while to lift the temperature up, and there's a bit of uncertainty about how quickly that happens. Earlier model runs were suggesting we might lose the frost risk by around Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. That's been pushed back a little bit, so we might now have frost to Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and then start to lose the frost in the second half of next week. The more frosty nights we get, of course, the more the temperature in terms of the CT will come down. So upper air temperatures lifting up next week, but probably staying quite cold for a while anyway. Down on the surface, there will be an increasing risk of fog, so that could be freezing and might linger all day. If we do start to get freezing fog lingering all day, then next week could actually turn out to be very cold, because we'll have overnight frost, and then temperatures don't get much above freezing at this time of year when we've got freezing fog on the scene. So hopefully we won't have too much of that, because freezing fog, very, very nasty. In the extended range, which takes us through the last week of January and just the beginning of February now, we see quite a lot of scatter. So we have these milder ensemble members up here, have these colder ensemble members down there. But GFS and its ensembles have backed off from the idea of a cold northerly snap. Remember, we talked about that in yesterday's video, the possibility of a cold northerly snap through the final week of January. The GFS ensembles have backed off that to some degree, but towards the end of the month, we do have these cold outlier members just here. They probably are unreliable. And of course, we can't discount the milder ensemble members up there. I think the GFS is pulling back from this idea of a cold snap from the north in the last week of January, but we can't totally yet discount the possibility completely. But the GFS has backed off from it over the last sort of day or so. The main thing, I suppose, really, other than temperature, is going to be that we're in for a much drier period. So I've got showers around today. They'll be on their way out by the end of this afternoon into this evening. And then essentially, we're looking now at around a week to 10 days of more or less completely dry weather for rugby. So it's indicative of Central England, of course. We should see plenty of dry weather coming up. Many parts of England and Wales. It will always be a little bit more unsettled across Scotland and Northern Ireland, particularly northern and western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we're exposed to west-south-westerly winds and a jet stream. But overall, this looks like at least a week, maybe more, of more or less completely dry weather for many parts of central England. The very closing days of January and into the beginning of February do turn more unsettled, with precipitation spikes starting to come back. That is all very extended range stuff and unreliable, so I wouldn't take that too seriously. In a reliable time frame, we are going into a much, much, much drier spell of weather. Temperature anomalies from the 17th to the 25th of January, a little bit milder than average for Scotland. A little bit cooler than average, though, for England, Wales, and much of Ireland as well. You'll notice West of Europe is generally looking quite cool. France is a little bit below average, for example. Spain and Portugal also. So the coolest conditions, except in this extreme southeast corner of the Mediterranean, the coolest conditions are in West of Europe. And we are included in that to some degree, particularly across England and Wales. That's primarily down to overnight frost. Still looking exceptionally mild for Scandinavia and northern parts of Europe. And this confirms the drier spells. This is the precipitation anomaly from the 17th to the 25th of January. Significantly drier than average for the UK and Ireland. In fact, some places probably having no measurable rain at all once today is out of the way. So we really are going high and dry in the week ahead. And this is how the GFS is looking for Monday. This is Monday, 20th of January. We've got a 1045 millibar area of high pressure over the top of the country. All of that low pressure been dominating the weather for so very long. It's all gone, and we're under a large ridge of high pressure. We are bringing in some mild air already around the top of the high into the north of Scotland. Probably quite a bit of cloud there as well, but otherwise we're under this ridge of high pressure. Be a lot of dry weather, probably cold nights and chilly days, colder by day if any fog was to linger. That situation for Tuesday, very little change. Wednesday, so this is the difference. Yesterday, the high pressure began to pull out to west of us on Wednesday. Now the high pressure remains more or less centrally located over top of the country. So this keeps the risk of frost and fog going perhaps into the middle of next week. Second half of next week, still the idea that the high pressure pulls out to the west, so that allows milder air to begin to invade from the northwest, probably with quite a lot of cloud as well. But it's a very close run thing, actually, even into the second half next week with this high pressure. It would only need to be adjusted a little bit further eastwards, the centre of that ridge, to keep, particularly England and Wales, dry, cold, frosty, potentially foggy, even into the second half of next week. So we do need to keep an eye on that, exactly how far to the west this high pressure is pulling, and will it allow those milder winds to invade from the northwest. Now this is then heading into the last week of January, so this is around the period where yesterday there was cold snap possibilities. So the GFS has backed off from that potential today. So now we just keep this high pressure quite close. So it actually begins to drift a little bit further eastwards. That probably starts to pull colder air back in off the continent, if anything. So after a milder, cloudier interlude in the second half next week, by the weekend of the 25th, 26th January, we could be going back to quite frosty conditions once again, maybe. And then heading up towards day 10, the GFS begins to reintroduce this westerly flow. Not with much conviction though, high pressure still trying to fight it out. Eventually, as we get to the very end of the month, this is the 31st of January, low pressure is beginning to break down this ridge properly. And so by the start of February, as far as we can go to Sunday the 2nd of February, by the start of February, we're back into those westerlies with probably bands of rain moving through the country. And showers in between. Notice still very intense polar vortex, these purple colours up over Greenland and Iceland. So fundamentally the broad pattern of this winter, which is low pressure over Greenland and the Arctic, an intense polar vortex with strong zonal winds, that kind of thing. Then high pressure from the Azores into France, Spain, Portugal and many central parts of Europe. Fundamentally that pattern is not changing. The only difference in the next few days is going to be that high pressure is further northwards, allowing the potential for some frosty conditions. But we are not fundamentally changing the pattern into something that would be conducive to produce proper Arctic or Siberian outbreaks at the moment. This is how the temperature has been forecast by the GFS run. So for today, quite a cool day actually. Temperatures are lowering already into mid to upper single digits. Tonight we might get a widespread frost developing. Temperatures going very close to freezing. Tomorrow's a little bit colder than today, but there will be much more in the way of sunshine around. A colder night tomorrow night with temperatures widely going into freezing. Suggesting around freezing at the lowest, perhaps around -2. But I think could go lower than that. Some rural areas might go down to -4, -5 on Saturday night into Sunday morning. Sunday, again, quite a cold day. Temperatures mid-single digits. Another widespread frost, most of us suggested for Sunday night. Monday, relatively cold. Remember, if fog was to linger, these temperatures would be even colder than this. So it's suggesting around 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees. Normally add a degree or two on if the sun is out, but if there's freezing fog lingering all day, then temperatures will actually not get much above freezing at this time of the year. Another pretty widespread frost, especially for England and Wales on Monday night into Tuesday. Tuesday's another pretty chilly day as well. Widespread frost for England and Wales on Tuesday night. Becoming frost-free for Scotland, and close run thing for Northern England and for Northern Ireland. Another pretty cold day for Wednesday, and then a frost across many central southern parts of England on Wednesday night. Northern areas becoming increasingly frost-free. Little bit less cold on Thursday, and most places just about frost-free on Thursday night. So by the end of the week, next week, temperatures are recovering. It's becoming a little bit milder as winds are coming in off the Atlantic. But several frosty nights to come from tonight really through to the middle part of next week, especially so for England and Wales. That's for GEM. So again, we're in about high pressure on Monday. Scotland's milder, otherwise quite cold, especially at night under that ridge. This goes on into Tuesday as well, probably still to Wednesday, and even on Thursday, England and Wales could be quite cold under that ridge. Increasingly mild and cloudy though further north, and then into second half of next week, then the ridge begins to weaken and drift southwards. So this is allowing milder winds coming off the Atlantic for all of us by that last weekend of January. Notice still quite a cold plunge for Scandinavia and North East Europe with this low pressure, but for us actually it's relatively mild here at day 10, Monday 27th of January with the GEM. Definite back away from that northerly cold snap possibility that we talked about in yesterday's video. ECM, again, looking mostly dry and cold as we begin next week. Milder across Scotland. This goes on into the middle of next week as well. Even into Thursday, this ridge is more or less centrally located across the country. So even into the second half next week, it could still be quite cold and frosty at night. It's not really until the final weekend of January, 25th to 26th January that we start to break down that high pressure and bring milder air and low pressure with perhaps some rain back in from off the Atlantic. And that's how we finish up with the ECM. Still just about possibly hinting that we're going to get a cold northerly. But up to day 10, that's relatively mild. It's just that wind is tilting round to the north as that low pressure moves in towards Scandinavia. So that one model, if we could roll on another 24 hours, could possibly still be producing a northerly snap. These are the options on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10, which is the 27th of January. Have 28 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure up to our north and bringing in wind from west-northwesterly direction at day 10. So it's unsettled, probably not all that mild either. In fact, for the north, it could be a little bit on the cold side, and that does include the operational and the control room. 23 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure over Scandinavia, so quite a deep trough over Scandinavia, high pressure to our west. That's lining the jet stream and wind direction up northwest to southeast. As we run through, we see that the options increasingly start looking like this. So by the end of the ECM ensembles, which gets us to the first day of February, 2 weeks away, 360 hours. We have 28 members of the ECM ensembles with high pressure to our southwest, low pressure to the north. That's dry and mild. And then 23 have high pressure more or less over the top of the country with low pressure out to the west just here. Technically that's mild, but because the high pressure is more or less over the top of the country, that could be back to sort of frosty conditions. They all look quite dry though as we're beginning February. So as I say, we could well have turned the corner now on this extended wet spell. Finally, this is how the CFS-V2 is looking for February today. This is the 700 millibar height anomaly. So it looks very unsettled up to our north, lots of low pressure around Greenland and Iceland. But for us, we're actually close to a ridge of high pressure. We have high pressure over to the south of the country, high pressure in central parts of Europe. Low pressure digging down across eastern parts of America. So it looks a very cold and wintry month potentially for eastern, northeastern parts of the state. So it has been a very mild winter. But for us, we remain pretty mild with that. Winds are still going to be coming from west or southwest. The only difference compared to December and January and even November and October, the only difference is that high pressure is much more influential. So you would expect it to be a rather drier month, but also quite mild. In fact, it could even be quite a spring-like sort of February if it comes off as CFS-V2 is forecasting. There. Temperature anomalies for February with the CFS looking very significantly milder than average. And also precipitation anomalies. No real signal, but I would have thought it's quite a dryish month close to that area of high pressure. So definite back away from the models today from that cold snap possibility in the last week of January. Remember, it was only a possibility. Even yesterday we said there was a lot of ifs and buts about it, and even those sort of that low possibility, there's been a further back away from that in the last few model runs. So if we want some cold weather, it's primarily going to come from high pressure and from frost and fog. The chances of northerly or easterly winds at the moment producing anything notably wintry and notably wintry snowy outbreak looks very, very remote. Would totally rule out the chance still of a cold snap in the last week of November. As we saw in the GFS ensembles, there were still some cold ensemble members, but a definite back away from that idea has occurred. We probably turn things milder and maybe more unsettled through the last week of January, but that's still a way off, so let's wait and see how this cold, frosty spell with fog develops over the coming days. And as we get through to February, the evidence at the moment seems to be another rather mild month, continuing this very mild winter, but we'll have to see about that, of course. Right, that's it for your videos for today. Tomorrow, we've got a very busy weekend coming up. So tomorrow, we've got weekend forecast, we have a week to 10-day video update with all the regular features. And also tomorrow, I've got the first CFS versus Beijing Climate Centre 6 months look ahead. More on that tomorrow evening. Sunday is going to be a really busy day. We have some spring analogues, Gazweb's Sunday roundup, ECMWF Meteo France and DWD seasonal model update, and Ensemble's watch. Going to be loads of videos over the weekend, so do keep checking back to all of them. Right, but that's all for now though, and thanks for watching.